I was on the cord. That happens a lot to me. Grab the microphone and tell us a little bit about kind of how things stand. How much, and I know there's so many things in your mind about the fire, but in terms of farmland, do you have any sense of what we lost, what happened, and what the status of that land is now that you can kind of describe to us in a way that makes some sense? Because it's hard for us to make sense about this monolithic experience.
Right, so thank you for having me. My name is Tony Gossner with San Jose Fire Department. In terms of farmland, I'll tell you that that night on October 8th into October 9th, there was 3 major fires that started: the Nuns, the Tubbs, and the Atlas, which all impacted a lot of farmland. And most of the farmland in Sonoma and Napa County, at least in those regions, are largely vineyards, right? So there were quite a few hundred acres of vineyards that were affected, and quite frankly, some of the vineyards worked as fire breaks quite well. And that happened later on in the evening. Early on, they didn't work so well because the wind was blowing so hard, it would just blow through the vineyards. So the vineyards were still green for the most part, except on the edges, but they do help as a fire break. From my understanding...
Well, hold on one second. So let's acknowledge that the vineyards act as a fire break, all right? I mean, let's hear it for the vineyards. Sorry. We got to do this because we celebrate apples, we celebrate peaches and prunes, and we celebrate flowers and livestock. And, you know, sometimes when we're celebrating at the Apple Fair, we're kind of thinking about how do we feel about wine and all the rest of it, but we have to remember that every piece of our agriculture plays a part with the rest of it. And I love the fire chief letting us know that sometimes, if they're still green, that the vineyards can act as a fire break.
They can, and apples and avocado orchards and all those orchards, they play a role as long as they take care of the land with it. One agricultural product that burns really well, if it's green or not, is marijuana.
Yeah.
And we're burning a lot of it up in Mendocino, so that is not a good fire break. Let me just get that out.
Well, it's important to remember that because, I mean, if your neighbor's backyard is on fire, you know, you can kind of tell, right? I mean, not everybody has that many skunks in the backyard. You know, when I'm not in Sonoma County in my 100-year-old loggers cabin in the Redwoods, I live in Manhattan on 42nd Street west of 11th Avenue, and I'll come into my hallway and I'll think to myself, this is a hallway on the 10th floor. Who ran over a skunk? All right. And, you know, as we go forward, we're going to have to integrate the conversation about cannabis in our community. I mean, historically, hemp grew all over the United States by the side of the railroad in many cases. We're going to have to keep talking about that. And we're going to regularly go to our fire chief to talk about how any new agricultural product plays into the whole fire scene. So, Tony, what else happened? What was the recovery?
Well, as far as the vineyards, I don't have a whole lot of knowledge on the recovery, other than that the vineyards did a good job as a fire break. And the first couple of you know, we're at the buffer zones where the fire really came in. Those took a lot of heat, and I think those were damaged. So they're, you know, vineyards are really good at repairing their land quickly and getting things done. So they get it squared away very quickly.
All right. The last thing, we're going to go to everybody. I want to introduce you to everybody. And then, by the way, if there are questions from the audience, we're very friendly that way. But, Tony, going forward, there's some process for people to talk to you in the department about what they're planning. I mean, I know that there are many different structures for the planning of everything in Sonoma County, but how does the fire department play into the conversation about what do we build next, where do we build it, and where's the moat with the alligators?
So in Santa Rosa, you're going to deal with the planning and economic development. They have all decisions based on land use. Council sets those directives. And the greater part of the county is the Board of Supervisors. So the city of Santa Rosa is one government, the county is another. If you live in Sebastopol, that's another government. So they set the rules on what can be and what cannot be. We provide input based on, in my case, on fire safety and things of that nature. So.
All right, so let's make sure that we keep our fire department involved in the conversation about what we're going to build next, large or small, living or dried. All right, let's hear it for Tony. Come on. Pass that microphone to your right, please. All right, so this is Austin and Missy Lely of Be Well Farms. Let's hear it for them. All right, Austin. should know that this is what I love about farm folk. We needed a couple of bales moved, and he just ran up and grabbed them and threw them on his shoulder and came over, right? Yes, I love that. So tell us a little bit about, what you lost and what's going on now. How are things going this year?
So we lost our house, some of our work vehicles, Kawasaki mule, hay barn. We lost pretty much everything in the fire. So we were right on Nuns Canyon, actually right next to Julie here, who is very prepared for this kind of stuff. We've learned quite a bit from her. And the fire came right through the night of the 8th, the morning of the 9th, and by about 2, 3 in the morning, almost a whole ranch was torched. So we lost a lot of fence lines, we lost power, we lost water. So we have livestock on the property, so that makes it very challenging to kind of manage them in that kind of crisis circumstance. And this year, we've had to pretty much go back through and redo about 20,000 feet of fence lines, and also rerunning water throughout the property. We also have a couple acres of produce out there, so that, we manage the floor there so nothing burns, but all the infrastructure, the greenhouse is gone, the shop's gone, the egg washing stations are gone, so it's really starting from the ground and going up this year. But like I was saying, we get to not repeat the same mistakes we did in the past, so we get to make it our way and a little bit nicer. But.
Well, and you said something interesting that you, again, so often farmers will go really quickly past something that we don't know anything about. You said that one of the areas did not burn because you managed the floor. Will you explain to everybody what that means to manage the floor of a farm?
Absolutely. So anything like a vineyard or an orchard, like you were saying, all the gardens, everything, all the soil's exposed. So once you're turning the dry matter under, it's not going to burn, or it's going to at least cause a break in the fire. So that was really nice because we have mobile chicken coops, and they were actually, one was in the garden, kind of cleaning up a little part of it. So fire went around that one, and then the other one was actually in a field. And the chickens had actually done a good enough job of turning the dry matter over, and the fire did not burn the coop. So that was a kind of a neat thing. But anytime you can turn dry matter over and expose soil, you're just going to give yourself a little bit more defensible space.
Yeah, I was talking to some friends who lost their entire farm in the Mark West Springs area, and they said they had all kinds of plants and also all kinds of animals, but the chickens were unbothered at all. What is it about chickens that gets them through a fire so well? Do you know?
They scratch a lot.
So they're always busy running around and turning the soil, and they know, keep it wet, keep it juicy, right? Find some grubs, right? Let the sheep pass through. All right, so this year, as you're rebuilding with some new knowledge and new experience, how can we all help your farm get through all this? How can we support you on a regular basis? And I'm guessing that something has to do with purchasing delicious food.
Absolutely, that's one of the main components. Right now we sell at 2 farmers markets in our area. One is a Friday morning farmers market in Sonoma. The other is Saturday morning in Oakmont. We've recently just started working with a couple local restaurants, Tips Roadside in Kenwood and Breakaway Cafe in Boys Hot Springs, Sonoma area. So if you make your way into there too, and just keep telling them buy more of our stuff too.
Listen, you're being sweet and gentle about it, but we're serious about this, aren't we, folks? We really want to say, hey, which is the dinner plate that has that stuff from that great farm that can, because this is how we vote with our forks, right? Yeah. Or spoons or knives or fingers. In my case, fingers, right? Right. You can have a huge impact on what is grown, raised, and available in your community in the coming years by what you do today. By buying produce, by supporting not just the farmers, but the people who support the farmers, by supporting those restaurants. Say all those names again, please, really slowly so people can get their cell phones out and tap, tap, tap in there. This is where I'm going for lunch next Tuesday. Go.
So Tips Roadside, it's a new restaurant in Kenwood. And the Breakaway Cafe in Sonoma, which is soon to be called Mint and Liberty. They're kind of rebranding themselves. And then the farmers markets, Sonoma Farmers Market Friday mornings and Oakmont on Saturday mornings.
All right, listen, we'll get a bus together, we'll get a hay wagon, we'll all go to all the farmers markets. All right, thank you, let's hear it for them. Come on, let's hear it. All right. Our next special guest is Julie Atwood. She is with the Halter Project, but she also has a gorgeous property that has been through some stuff. Please welcome Julie Atwood. Julie, first of all, tell us two things. One, describe what Halter is, because it's a very important, wonderful organization. And then tell us quickly what happened in the fire so that we can talk about what's going to happen in the future.
So the Halter Project is a grassroots program born and raised right here in Sonoma County, based at our home in Glen Ellen at the corner of Highway 12 and Nuns Canyon Road, so own it. We all know what that means. So Halter started out as the Horse and Livestock Team Emergency Response Project. We bring funding, equipment, and training resources to firefighters and other first responders to train them and help them develop skills to handle animals of all types, but primarily equines, livestock, and working canines, so that they can help them when they are in a bad spot and they can do it safely and minimize the risk to themselves. That's actually how we started. And the fire service said, hey, this is really great and you do a good job of reaching us. Could you help us reach our communities? Could you help us to engage our rural residents, our suburban people, our people who aren't up here all the time because they own second homes, and help them understand how to be better prepared in an emergency or a disaster, how to help themselves, their families, their neighbors, their relatives, and their animals. And so we started a second arm of the Halter Project, and we call it Leading Residents to Safety and Preparedness. And that's our community outreach program, and that's really why we're here today. So
wait a second, Julie, how do people find out more about it? Because we're all going to look this up after we leave here. How do we look? How do we go online and learn more about Halter?
You can go online at halterproject.org, and we also have 2 info booths here. If you're in the Artisan Tasting Lounge, come see us there. Or you can go up just beyond all the cute baby farm animals and look for our information booth up there. We've got lots and lots of info for you.
Julie, I want to mention something. Sonoma County is very well known for thinking innovatively, and I think this is brilliant work, about animals and humans and how we all get together. One of the notices we got out at the river was that in a fire like the one we had a year ago, October, animals move. Right, and in the Sonoma Valley, that's one thing. But out at the river, they kind of came down towards the water, right? And they weren't kidding. And what was wonderful is that in our community, we were prepared. We suddenly knew not to freak out if we suddenly saw a lot more deer than we were used to seeing, right? Or wild turkeys, or the occasional cougar. And by that I mean the animal, the cat.
And then, so that's wild. Yeah.
Just saying.
He wasn't talking about me.
He was.
He tried. So yes, wildlife, we are much more aware of wildlife in times of drought, in times of other weather events like fires, and they are going to be much more prevalent, as are loose livestock, other people's pets. They're all going to be displaced. They're stressed just like their human counterparts, and most of the time in hot weather events, they are going to be going toward water. So it's just something to be aware of, and awareness is the A word. Being aware of what you need to do so that you can be prepared for a disaster or an emergency, so that you can bounce back, so that you can recover. And I think the name of this panel is What's Resilience Look Like?
And so let's ask specifically about your property, because this is such a wonderful organization and you do so much in the community. But let's get personal here. You lost a bunch of stuff while you were busy actually sharing a lot of the recovery effort with a lot of different people. What happened, and what's the status of your property now?
So we're neighbors. So we basically have occupy all the properties from Nuns Canyon to Trinity Road. So that was pretty much, Chief, that was a pretty hot spot, right? Not your hot spot, but it was a hot spot. And so the fire was actually on us before a lot of resources knew there was a fire. And we did what we do not advocate that most of you do, and that is that we sheltered in place. We were able to do that safely, even though the fire was on us, and ran through our properties very quickly, because we had defensible space. We had plans. We knew where to go so that we would be safe, so that we would not be putting our responders, who were stretched really thin, at risk. The fire started in our neighborhood at about 9:45, and by 11:30 we were fully involved. We weren't in communication with each other, but all of the ranches on our side were putting their plans into place. We have a big area that was designated as our safe space. It's our partially covered arena. It's a metal structure. It's got vineyards on 2 sides, and it's got a big driveway that you can drive all the way around. We keep it clear for emergency vehicles. That was our plan, is go to that safe space. So we got all of our animals, our horses, my mule, my cats, and ourselves to that space, and then we started working with our fire resources to try to keep the fire off the buildings and getting worse. So I am right next door to Be Well Farm, and there were a lot of livestock on that property. We share pasture, and so we had, for many years, including up till about July of last summer, had our cattle and many of our horses on the pasture that's divides where Austin and Missy and many other family members and their property live and our property. And so it was that space that was grazed down, that was managed, combined with the green cultivated space, combined with the space that the chickens were in, that helped us save our animals, save some of the resources on our properties, and enabled us to make it through and be resources in our neighborhood for the fire service.
Let's hear it for planning. Let's hear it for planning. It is wonderful to hear. We need to hear these success stories, right? We have heard a lot about what we've lost. We've heard a lot about the challenges. We need to have benchmark planning and survival stories. All right, so how's the property today?
The property is recovering. If you're able to manage your property, whether you have a great big farm or whether you have just a little backyard, if you manage it, if you create defensible space, if you plant so that you are creating some additional humidity, and vegetable gardens are really, really good for that. Our vegetable garden borders Calabasas Creek and Nuns Canyon Road. It was one of the few green things left on our property. The tomatoes and the peppers and the roses loved it.
Now we know what to do with those extra zucchini. Right? And it's a fire break. Yay.
And the vegetable gardens in our neighborhood, in Sonoma Valley, in Kenwood, and Glen Ellen, and Bennett Valley, vegetable gardens were feeding us, and they were feeding the fire service. And can I say something about Tips for a minute?
Sure.
Okay, so Tips Roadhouse, who is probably one of the greatest supporters of farmers in our community, during the entire period of the fires, the family who owns Tips, they were also burned out. They took their tri-tip trolley on the road, and every single solitary day it was staged at a different fire station in our valley, and they were feeding free all of the first responders, all of the neighborhoods, everybody. So
let's hear it for Tips.
Tips and the farmers. Because the farmers had no market for their foods. The markets were closed, the roads were closed, nobody could get in or out, but there was this bounty of produce from the small family farms, from the big producers, and it was all there. And because of the generosity and the energy of the chefs, who also couldn't keep their restaurants open, the grocery owners, there was food. And I just want to say that's why we're all here. It's to protect the food shed and the farmers and the future of agriculture in our county.
Yes. All right, great. Thank you, Julie. Thank you. All right, we're going to get back to Julie. I have a couple more questions for her, but I want you to meet Joey Smith of Let's Go Farm. Joey, so tell us a little bit about what happened with your farm and where you are today.
Sure. Thanks for having me on this panel. I live in Rican Valley on the property I grew up on. So your question, what was lost? My childhood home, a lot of photo albums, non-digitized, this really cool FedEx truck that we had repurposed for box storage, and a list of 1,000 other things. And I have my business there. It's an 1.5 acre market garden, organic fruits and veggies, and we lost our capacity to sell food in 2017, and water, a lot of parallels there, water, electric. And what was the next question? Lost lot.
Yeah, we got that.
Yeah.
So now what's happened since then? How are you guys doing now? What does the future hold for you?
Couple great things, a lot of great things since the fire. One is seeing the way that to feel out and know that you're part of community is something maybe some people don't have shined on them. And we're all in this. I don't know most of you, but we're in a community. We're in a food shed. We're in a watershed. So that, I think, shifting lens, also the shifting lens of seeing biomass as fuel, which I'm sure that you've spent decades doing. So I'll always do that, not in a fearful way sometimes in the summer, but as okay, how can we manage this? This land is burned over and over. So I think that little shift is worth mentioning. And as far as the business, we haven't sold much. It's an operation of me and a couple part-time employees, but we've put in a lot more perennials, thought it through how we would have done it back in 2011 when we started, had we had what we knew. So we've got a sweet orchard and new fence up and a lot of unsellable improvements, but gearing up for being able to feed our community for decades, right? Like if you decide to move back, you're probably going to be there a while, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Joey, yours is an example of one of the more difficult situations. I mean, small plot of land, right? A lot of your resources at challenge. In the meantime, I know that we all want to be able to be supportive in ways that are tangible and immediate, as well as midterm and long range. I'm glad that you remind us that it's about community. I mean, I was in New York on 9/11, and I never realized before how incredibly warm and connected New Yorkers are. Oh my God. I mean, don't interrupt them while they're trying to get coffee. But when things are tough, New Yorkers are like farm people, right? It's like we're in this against tough stuff together, and we need to help each other, right? So tell us a little bit about how you might be able to receive support and help from the community in the shorter term.
I appreciate that. You know, I saw some of the questions, I wrote out some things, and I really wanted to echo what y'all were saying, which is if y'all can kind of normalize into your routine, go into the farmer's market. I'm usually at the Windsor Farmers Market, not so much this year, off and on. We run a CSA. You know, CSA membership in this county had a nice run, and it's going down quite a bit. So if you hear about one and that's at all interesting to you, to pre-purchase your veggies so that the farmer can get capital when they need it and not go into debt. So that's what I wrote, because that actually is concrete, but it's more medium long term, and it's really just you're at the supermarket, more and more there are things that, like, beautiful signs that say where it came from. Like, you should pay a little extra more for that if you can.
Wait a second. I want us to pause and say pay a little extra more for that if you can. Remember that every time you pay a little extra more for something really good and really local, you're getting it back. You're supporting your own communities. Let's hear it for thinking the right way and supporting it. I mean, right? A lot of times you guys gloss over this like, no, that's something you need to tell us, and we need to hear it, and we need to embrace it and say, I don't care if it's 3% more, 5% more, or 20% more. That's going to keep a peach orchard in my valley where I will be able to have it and my kids will be able to have it. Go ahead.
Well said. Yeah. For me in the short term, I really, our farm had a crowdfunding campaign that was really helpful that some friends put on. I think right now, just, I would ask people if they're in a what can we do is like, keep listening to farmers, keep gathering at community events, whether they seem like they're about farming or not. Like, before the fire, we're in Rincon Valley. Some of our neighbors knew that we were in a high fire zone. So we asked the fire department to come down from Rincon Valley and have a little talk, a little community gathering. We were planning a much bigger one for basically just best practices on your property, what you can do to slightly reduce the danger. If everyone does that, that makes a big difference. And even though I know you're asking about farming, I'm really seeing it through that lens of like, can you get your community together? Because even if you don't prevent a fire, you got together and you knew your neighbors, you knew who to call when there was a fire, which I'm afraid to say I wasn't in that position, and I grew up there.
And you grew up there.
Yeah, so just, I would say, more face-to-face interaction with your neighbors can only be a good thing.
You're making me think that what we really ought to be doing is having dinners where we charge everybody to come, where we get all the stuff from existing farms, and where we invite a farmer to come and talk to us.
Farmers we do a lot of thinking in the fields there.
I know, you have to talk out loud sometimes. I always say that if you spend an hour with a farmer or a cheesemaker, you're stealing sleep. Because there's only 24 hours in the day. But right now, these guys are waiting for nature. They are waiting for nature. This is a really good time to invite farmers. By the way, make sure that their farm gets some of the money from the dinner. I mean, that's the deal, right? It's ongoing crowdfunding. But this is a moment where we can really engage and talk to our farmers. You're one of those people you see, we've never met before, and it's really lovely to talk to you like this. You're one of those farmers who doesn't mind sharing their thoughts. I mean, the awareness is different, but is that approach different, or have you always been willing to chat with folks?
Oh, the farmers market's been good for that.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And our CSA, I don't know. I just know that truly in other talks pre-fire, my message was trying to be like, listen to farmers because they've got a good understanding of what's going on there. I'm so glad we have representatives of the animals. I want to use some time on the mic to say we let our sheep out. We lost no animals, thankfully, and we were incredibly amazed at the Good Samaritans and the civil society around people with that thread of we care about animals.
Yep.
We're going to help your animals out. So thank you for that too.
Did you get them all back, or did they go someplace else to summer for the weekend?
People fostered our animals. They wouldn't accept payment. We had healthy lambs born to sheep that were pregnant the night of the fire.
Unbelievable.
Out of the kindness of people's hearts. And that is something I don't want to say for too long, but like there was a little bit of utopianism in those couple weeks, right?
Yeah.
And like we all cared about whether our neighbor had enough to eat and a roof over their head. And it's a little weird, like 10 months out, that's like less palpable, but yeah, like I think that's fun.
I love that. All right, pass the mic down to Tony again. Tony, Joey brought up something here that's really kind of wonderful. I mean, here's somebody who grew up in a community and who has been doing this for a long time, and for whom this was pivotal and mind-changing in certain ways. You have been in your field for a long time. You've seen a lot of stuff. You've been through a lot of stuff. Was the fire in October different? Did it change the way you and the department look at these things, or the way you approach it from before?
Yeah, actually it's changed the way the entire fire service has looked at it, because what we're experiencing today is much different than we were experiencing 5, 10, 15 years ago. So it's just things are happening much more quick, much faster, with much more intensity. And Julie brought up a great point. Two things I want to speak about what Julie brought up. She stayed and kind of defended. She was able to do that because she was prepared. I will tell you, there's people that stayed to try to defend that are no longer with us because they were not prepared. When we give evacuations, they're mandatory. We call them mandatory. You don't have to leave. We can't make you leave, but we want you to leave so we can free up to do our work. So that was a great example of she was ready to go, and there was really no time to run, right? So that's the other thing. In the beginning stretches of some of these fires, there are segments of the community, they don't have a choice, right? But Julie did everything to make sure that she had the ability to maintain what she had.
All right, first of all, let's find out where you all are from. How many are from Sonoma County? From Sonoma Valley? From West County? All right, good. All right, make no mistake, there are fires historically in West County as well. Catastrophic all the way to the coast. I remember that when I was getting out that morning, when I was there for the first couple of days, I had to leave to go to New York. I was packed and ready to go. I had something by my side all the time waiting for somebody to say, get the heck out. And I had to go at 116. I couldn't obviously go River Road to Mark West down to 101. It was just not going to happen. But I also was prepared to go down the coast if I had to. So one of the most important things you can do, simple planning, right, is number one, find out what the best escape hatch is. And number two, check with the fire department to see what they say.
Yeah, you can always reach out to your local fire department. They're going to be more than happy to come out and talk with you. I will tell you, who's been here longer than 100 years? Anybody?
Don't we look good?
Whose family's been here longer than 100 years? So if you've seen pictures of your land from 100, 120 years ago, it's much different than it was today. I got family, we're from Occidental, been here over 150 years, and the pictures that I see are much different than what's growing on the land today. And that's true all over the county, which creates a different fire problem.
Right, and remember that if you're from Occidental, you do inhale, right? I mean, it's just, How many of you have been to the Occidental Farmers Market on Friday nights? If you haven't, you must go. It is absolutely unique and wonderful and community gathering, right? It is really, it's a party, but in the right kind of way, right? Isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
But pause. Go ahead, Chief.
So no, Occidental's great. They got a great thing going. Just like a lot of communities in Sonoma County, it's good if we all enjoy a little bit of everything, right? You know, and share. Don't always go to Occidental. Sometimes come out to Sonoma Valley. Sometimes you got to kind of move around and see what's out there.
Absolutely. And what you're doing, by the way, is if you go to the Tuesday night farmers market in Forestville and the Thursday night farmers market in Guerneville, what you're going to be doing is supporting those farmers that go to multiple farmers markets that it turns out have ripe fruits and vegetables in the middle of the week. What a shock, right? Not only Sunday morning. All right, let's hear again from the Be Well Farm folks, right? So obviously you're changing a lot of the practices and you're rebuilding a lot of stuff. Any surprises, any pleasant surprises in this process of rebuilding and of regenerating your farm? I see a nodded yes.
There's a lot of good things that have come out of all of this chaos and destruction. One of the major things is because of all the support the community has given us, we've really had a chance to purchase things that we actually want to work with, not using, whatever scraps we had that we kind of gathered up before just to get work done. So that's been amazing as far as rebuilding this year, just efficiencies and the right tools and equipment for the right job. So that's been amazing.
That happens, right? Sometimes a disaster when everything goes to heck. Mm-hmm. Right? I live in Heck's Kitchen. It used to be called Hell's Kitchen. But anyway, when things go bad or wrong or we lose things, it does make room for other things. We wouldn't choose the loss, but once it's there, we can make choices about the future, right?
Yeah,
anything else that you want to share with us about the surprising goodness?
Absolutely. One of the big things was adding in fence signs that weren't there and gates and access, because animals on land clear the land. They really do. They lift the canopy up. They reduce the fuels on the ground. So if you do have a couple acres and it is fenced, find someone with some sheep and put them out there, because that's going to keep the land clear for years and years and years, and just make it a habit. Because it's really a good preventative tool.
I see the fire chief nodding his head, yes, please do that. All right, Julie, tell us a little bit about your property and what we can do you do so much for the community and the organization, but your property alone, what can we do to support your property?
Well, I'm particularly blessed. We grow grapes, and our harvest was about 90% in before the fire hit, so no problems there. Our vineyard saved us. And in terms of regeneration, I wish that we could have gotten our fences rebuilt faster so I could bring a lot of my animals back home. But we felt it was more important for our neighbors who are farmers and our people across the street and our other ranches to be able to rebuild faster. So right now, I've just been spending the better part of the spring and summer looking around to try to see what we could do better. And we actually developed a great relationship with a contract grazier out in West Petaluma, and for about 2 months we had a flock of about 120 hair sheep and a few random goats. And I'd
always random goats. Whenever you do random
I have a goat story too. And we had wanted to do that for a really long time, but just never quite got around to it. And frankly, with our own resources and our cattle, we didn't really have the need for it. But since the fire and then the rains, we see what nature does, and nature brings abundant pasture back, but with it is abundant fuel. And so that was actually a really cool thing. I got involved with a whole new community of people. I was involved in the Transhumans Festival, which was really, really a cool thing. Get involved with your local fiber shed as well as your food shed, and they are connected. And we talk a lot about getting to know your neighbors, but I really think that your point about this sort of utopian society that developed for a few weeks, it's really true. And we talk a lot about get to know your neighbors, but in our rural communities, our neighbors might be a quarter of a mile away from us. We know each other, but we don't necessarily hang out together, especially if they could be my kids and I could be their grandmother, we don't do that much together. But during the fire, it really brought our communities together, and one of the messages that the Halter Project has been working really hard to push out into the community, as our community in Sonoma and Marin and the North Bay change, we have many more people moving into our rural farming agrarian areas who don't know anything about farming, and they think that they're really going to love it, but then when it comes summer and you've got flies and you've got the smell of manure or you've got chickens, it's like they want the charm but not the farm, but they love that good food. And so I would say that one of the real silver linings, or the lemonade stand that came out of this fire, is it's really brought a lot of the community who might go to the farmers market once in a while. They definitely ate out at all the great restaurants, but they didn't really have as much of a connection. And that's what's going to save you and us in the next disaster, whatever it is, fire, flood, a big tree coming down, an earthquake, knowing who your neighbor is. And if your neighbor's a farmer, they're just like you, but with a different career path.
Well, and also more preparedness and more knowledge about adaptability, right? Joey, I want to ask you something. Yeah, you know, did you hear that list? Fire, flood, earthquake, I mean, right? We live in all of this, right? We live in all of this all the time. Turns out that's true everywhere else on Earth too. We're just a little bit more aware of it. I don't know how many of you knew people who, in the last boom, before 2008, people had all this money and they were buying stuff and they were moving here. It's really interesting to think about the people who came, who announced that they were the best farmer that ever lived, because they came from marketing, and who did it for about 3 years and it was way too hard, and who sold it at a huge loss, but they can afford it, right? And no disrespect, I'm glad if what people want when they have a whole bunch of money is to be in nature and in a farm. There's nothing wrong with that. We just need to help them understand what that really, really means in a general way. So Joey, in the meantime, I keep thinking of ways to bring people to your farm. Is your farm yet to the point where, for example, a chef could come and do a dinner? Because, you know, again, a lot of times people want to have these meals in farm country, but it's not so convenient for the farm unless they're in a situation like this.
That's true. I'd be open to that. I did want to mention I am selling some food to Three Leaves Kitchen. They're on West 3rd and Fulton, which is a community-supported kitchen. So they buy food from great small farmers. Sometimes our surplus, sometimes our uglier stuff that they're chopping up anyway. Yeah, I'd be open to that. I was really influenced by the farm that I learned to farm on, which is Hidden Villa, and also Eliot Coleman.
Oh my gosh.
I got to go to his farm in Maine, and I was really impressed by the open door nature of that farm, those farms. And
how many of you know who Eliot Coleman is? He kind of is the father of organic farming. He really kind of articulated and codified a lot of it, and was incredibly generous, just as you can sometimes go to Italy or France and find really generous cheesemakers, for example, who will tell you the whole 300-year history or 2,000-year history. Eliot Coleman wanted to share as much knowledge as there was, right?
I think it's our responsibility in this day and age, and it's a dialogue, it's a back and forth. Yeah, I'd be open to that. I think I'll just say, like, any given this week, this year in 2018, we've had groups small and big. I'm really excited. The Girl Scouts are going to come in and put in some fire-safe pollinator hedgerow.
I love that.
So we're trying to be open.
If they try to leave any thin mints, don't take it. All right, we want to have some questions from you, or comments, or things that you'd like the panel. This is such a wonderful group of people. Before we go any further, let's hear it for this really wonderful panel. Thank you all for being here. Yeah, you're going to applaud each other and yourselves. Any questions you guys would like to ask the folks? Don't be shy. I know none of you are. You can ask questions of each other. Make the question brief and the answer long.
So, Be Well Farm, you guys have bees, right? Can you tell everybody what happened to your bees?
Yes, we lost both our hives in the fires, but we were able to not build our own and get our own hives. This year we're working with a nonprofit organization called North Coast Apiaries, and we will host hives on the property. And so it's really nice. It's a non-invasive type, so you just make a nice home for the bees, kind of cork them, invite them in, and then maybe do one honey harvest at the end of the year that we'll split with North Coast Apiaries. But it's a really great way to not have to do all that myself, still have bees to, you know, pollinate the crops and the fields and everything.
How many of you have bees? How many of you wish you could not have bees? Right? No, it's really a wonderful thing to see. How many of you have ever heard of Hector's honey at the farmer's market? Right? He lost all of his hives. they are almost all replenished. Because it turns out that bees, you know what, like bunnies. Who knew, right? All those queens are having a good time. And by that I mean the bees. All right, questions from the audience, come on.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah, please.
So speaking of the farm dinners, we're planning our first one for this fall. If any of you would like tickets to buy that, you could find them at our website, b-wildfarms@gmail.com, and then our Facebook page as well.
Say it again, say it again.
It's going to be October 6th from 5 to 10 p.m. and there'll be live music, dancing, and a buffet farm style.
And again, give us really slowly the website, how to find it slowly, because we're sleepy because it's warm here.
Our website's www.b-wellfarms.com.
There you go. I like the nice pause. And Julie, you have an event coming up. All right, so tell us about that event.
So the Heritage Turkey event, and this.
I have to tell you, oh my gosh, I got to go to this some years ago when it was at Schoen Farm, and several turkeys escaped, and they were delicious. But this is one of those things where, if you really want certain things to be good and available forever, forgive me, you have to eat them. You know what I mean? And also, people learn so much. I believe in what Dusty Estes always says from Zazu, that her animals have wonderful lives except for one bad day. If you know what I mean? If the harvest is done right, we are a community that really respects life. Absolutely. So, Julie, tell us about that dinner.
So the Heritage Turkey Sunday Supper, this will be the 13th, but technically it's the 14th because the 13th last year had to be canceled because of the fires. So this is where a large number of our local 4-H and FFA kids who raise delicious, fabulous, beautiful heritage turkeys, so that not only a select few people, because there's still only about 250 being grown in the county,
right,
so that you can have a heritage turkey for your Thanksgiving dinner, and also so that these fantastic heritage breeds will continue to grow and thrive, and there will be more of them, and pretty soon a heritage turkey can be on everyone.
Think about getting everyone who can hear me right now, to imagine a food system where the beekeepers have a pretty good, they can make it, right, as agrarians. The graziers can make it, can go, and maybe we have this opened up post-fire, maybe this perspective of Fountain Grove. I look at Fountain Grove, right, it's a lot fewer lights up there now. What if we can engage that farm, keep this dialogue going, and imagine a food system where there's graziers who can afford housing in Sonoma County and to have a good life,
and to move them through.
And fuel reduction, and pollinator services. I'm really trying to find myself only involved in win-win situations, and I think our county can do that with post-fire. I think fuel reduction can be paired with agrarian pursuits.
And I want to describe this a little bit. One of the things that we make a mistake about is we try to oversimplify things and press a button and have it be simple and done. And we think that anything that has more moving parts is complicated. But it's not complicated, it's complex and rich and healthy and alive, right? All right, look, we all want you to be able to come up and say howdy to these wonderful folks, to wander around and to enjoy the Gravenstein Apple Fair. First of all, let's hear it for the Gravenstein Apple Fair. Can we do that? I'm so glad. This is a fair that we have to keep supporting, otherwise it won't be here, right? And also, again, let's hear it for our fire chief and our farmers and our community. Thank you all so much for being here. Come on up and say hello.